So it seems that the writing's on the wall for a fair few Chaos kits and options. Let's talk about the choices that have been banished to the realms of Warhammer Legends. Hello and welcome back to Warspets Tactics, where today we're talking Chaos, and I thought we'd talk about some of the war gear changes that Games Workshop have made in the Codex, and the way that really quite a lot of models couldn't take the exact same things as they could before. I made a video a couple of weeks back on the subject, things like Jump Pack, Lords, Sorcerer choices, various different squads war gear, all were a bit neglected, and also a few units had gone AWOL as well. Today it seems that Games Workshop have addressed a few of those issues by updating their Warhammer Legends document, and it's kind of interesting to see which things they've decided to address and which things they've decided against doing. For those of you who are a bit less familiar with Warhammer Legends, it's a concept that they introduced in 8th edition when Games Workshop updated the codexes and basically removed quite a lot of options from the game that some armies had had for lots of editions before. Things like Space Marine characters on bikes like this Chaplain are pretty typical examples. In theory, they publish a final set of rules to keep these choices playable in casual games, but they don't recommend them for more competitive or tournament game settings. The new codexes aren't really written with them in mind, and they don't factor into any of their balance updates, so in theory there could be a lot of stuff that's really underpowered, and maybe the occasional thing that's just very, very strong for the points cost when you take it into context of new rules. At least in my experience, this generally manifests in people just not really taking these choices very much. I think for a lot of people, they quite enjoy army list building and theory crafting ways to make their army stronger. It sort of undermines the theory crafting and stuff if you're taking a lot of choices that are only allowed in certain games with your opponent's permission. I kind of feel if there's any really strong stuff to come out of Warhammer Legends, then using it almost feels like just exploiting loopholes as opposed to doing anything clever in army construction. For more casual games though, particularly using the stuff that you just happen to have models for that were a bit weaker, I do think that the Warhammer Legends rules are pretty nice that Games Workshop have made the effort to do them, as the alternative would be just forcing players to either not use the models, or homebrew rules, or proxy them as something else. Don't get me wrong, I think it is good that they do this Warhammer Legends thing. The alternative would just be not to support the models that they have sold rules for in the past whatsoever, and that does seem worse to me. However, with all that, I think that most people would generally prefer just their choices they already have to be included in the actual codex. That way there's no debate as to whether or not you can or should use them in certain contexts. But throughout 8th and 9th edition, Games Workshop have generally been clamping down on only making rules for the models that they actually sell, and hence Warhammer Legends is a bit of a halfway house, better than them doing nothing to support the rules, but arguably worse than just putting all these things into the codex in the first place. It's kind of interesting that throughout 9th edition, 40k Legends hasn't really been updated whatsoever. The Chaos Wargear changes seem to be the first thing that's prompted them to review one of their datasheets. The previous Chaos Space Marines Legends documents just had a few HQs, either mounted on the various steeds of Chaos, like Palanquins of Nurgle or Juggernauts of Khorne, plus the bike-mounted Sorcerer and Chaos Lord. So all that aside, let's actually go through what's in the Chaos Legends update. First up, I noticed that all of the points have been redone in the 9th edition style. Previously, the Legends documents were in the 8th edition point style, the one where you had the unit model cost and the war gear cost listed separately, and I must admit the 9th edition ones are so much easier to use. Kind of surprisingly, there's no actual new datasheets in this document, it just appears to be the same HQs that they had before, and kind of weirdly they have wiggled around with a couple of the points costs. I noticed that combi bolters used to be 3 points and now they're 5. Kind of interesting that they still seem to be pursuing their multiples of 5 rule, even when they're updating defunct datasheets. In terms of actual updates here, it's all war gear on character choices. Perhaps the most bemoaned change for the Chaos Space Marine players is the removal of the Chaos Lord with the jump pack. It was really quite a popular choice and common conversion, as it means that your Chaos Lord gets around the board loads faster, gets into combat and gets to use all their fancy melee profiles, as well as being really quite a narrative choice for armies like Night Lords. On top of that, they sold this individual Chaos Lord with jump pack and lightning claws model until very recently indeed. I think in theory you could have bought this guy less than 5 months before the codex dropped, and I must admit it's a bit of a weird move to be selling this guy right up to the point where you declare these rules invalid. I'm sure that really doesn't affect very many people whatsoever worldwide, but it does seem like a strange move. For the Legends choices, it just says that you can add the jump pack back on for 25 points as a war gear option, and the fact that it's appearing here makes me think that they're not likely to do a digital updated datasheet option like they did with the Eldar Autarch, though I did think it was less likely that they'd do it for the Chaos Lord than that. Otherwise, they added back in other Legends war gear options that got cut. The standard Lord can take combi weapons in Legends again, as they can lightning claws. The standard Lord on foot can't do either of those in the new book for some reason, and the Chaos Terminator Lord got added back in the option to take a chain fist, which he seems to have lost. I'd say that as it stands now, this guy is one of these examples from Warhammer Legends where fielding it with the Legends rules gives you a very powerful new option that you wouldn't have out of the standard codex, as it does put players in an awkward place, using the Legends rules are supposedly declared somewhat imbalanced by Games Workshop themselves, so choosing to field a really strong jump back Lord with that does look a bit weird. I guess it depends on how strong the Chaos Codex does wind up being. If it does wind up being somewhat middle of the road to underwhelming, then having the option of a very fast moving Lord who's very dangerous might still not be the worst thing. Otherwise, we've got a few changes to the Sorcerers. One of the weirder choices out of the new Chaos book was restricting the Sorcerer to just be the one loadout for the single foot Sorcerer that they've sold. Now Chaos Sorcerers can only take Force Staves, where they've basically been able to take the complement of Force weapons for quite a while now. And it does feel at least kind of at odds with these made-to-order sorcerers that they've released. Technically, 0 out of 3 of those actually have a legal loadout that you can play in current 40k, unless you use the Legends rules now. Even the one that does have a Force Stave also appears to have a Plasma Pistol, which again isn't an option outside of Legends. In any case, the Legends options allows you to use combi weapons and Plasma Pistols on your standard foot sorcerers, swap out the Force Stave for an axe or a sword, and again take a jump pack for an extra 25 points, very powerful on a unit that can deliver some serious buffs. Next up we've got the Warpsmith and the Exalted Champion, just a few little details here. The Warpsmith's options now reflect the new model for him that replaced the updated Finecast one. He lost the option to take combi weapons and things with the new model, but the Legends datasheet allows him to take them again. And the Exalted Champion basically gets the options to take a bunch of fancy war gear, kind of similar to the Chaos Lord really. Again, in the new book, he's locked to the single mastercrafted power axe and the combi melter. It does feel a little bit weird to restrict this guy so much, as he basically only came back for a brief made-to-order period, and I don't believe is available to buy on the Games Workshop web store anyway. That's it for the actual content of the Legends update, but I must admit I think I was a bit more surprised as to what wasn't here as opposed to what was here. I kind of thought if they did a Legends update for Chaos Space Marines in general, then they'd almost certainly want to include a datasheet for Mutilators. They kind of feel the absolute ideal unit for Legends. A previous Chaos Space Marine unit, they sold a Finecast kit for really quite a long time. Not that many people had them, as they were resin models that weren't particularly nice. Their in-game rules have largely been lackluster, and their appearance just isn't great either. Compared with Lord Jump Packs, people really don't seem to be as bothered about these guys going away, but they do feel like perhaps one of the perfect units that they could make a Legends datasheet for. They sold models for them until fairly recently. Now their Codex datasheet is gone, so Warhammer Legends should be the place where they'd probably step in to make them at least playable. I guess otherwise maybe you could just run them as Possessed models. Now the Possessed are getting bigger, they might actually fit the bill quite well for that. Otherwise, for datasheets gone for the Codex, I guess maybe they could have given the same treatment to Fallen or Greater Possessed, but I feel like perhaps they're less of a big issue. Fallen, I think you could generally just run as standard Chaos Legionaries, and Greater Possessed are kind of unit fillers for a standard Possessed squad now. Again, now the models got so much bigger. Otherwise, no changes for things like unit war gear, Terminators, Combi Bolters, and Fists remain arbitrarily restricted. Chosen options just reflect the kit. There's no legend support for, say, heavy weapons in the unit, and no sign of vehicle-mounted combi plasmas getting a Legends treatment either. I guess updating datasheets would be a little bit more fiddly than the character choices, but I suspect at least some people would have been made happy if they'd got Legends options for those choices. So anyway, that's about the summary of what's on this new Chaos Legends datasheet update. Looks like jump boards aren't going to be coming back at any point imminently until whatever time they decide to actually release a plastic kit for one. A fair few of the other character war gear bits get the Legends treatment, which I think is better than getting nothing at all, but worse than being in the Codex. I'll be interested to hear what you guys have to say though. Let me know your thoughts down in the comments below. If you've enjoyed the video, feel free to subscribe to Auspex Tactics, or I'll certainly keep the regular 40k updates coming. I'll hopefully be making plenty more content on the new Chaos book. Finally, if you have been enjoying all the videos on the channel, I'd just like to mention that Auspex Tactics does also have a Patreon page as well. You can find that one down in the video description if you're interested, and it is what allows me to keep on making videos like this quite so regularly. If you are watching a lot, then any support is enormously appreciated. Channel patrons do get a fair few advantages, seeing certain videos early, regular votes to see what sort of things come next on the channel, and automatic entry into the regular prize giveaways with a chance to win some big model kits each month. If any of that sounds good to you, or you'd just like to help support, the link is down in the video description. In any case, a massive thank you for listening, and I'll hope to see you guys next time.